my internet connection went down, so I'm running off my phone at the moment on a fairly weak signal. Anyway, welcome to our second of the pre-Zoom winter technical sessions. And thank you for your patience while logging on. That seems to have happened, I hope, okay. Our speakers today are Peter Vida and Steve Cox from Marine16, and they'll be speaking about diesel fuel, how it's changing, and how to look after it. So I'll hand over straight away to Peter so that he can get going. Thank you.
Okay, John, thank you very much, and thank you for having us. So Marine16 manufacturers, I'll go straight into the presentation, manufacturers of diesel fuel additives, fuel management systems, and biodegradable zero plastic cleaning products, if you like. We particularly clear zero plastic. We supply through 150 plus channels throughout the UK, and we've got a growing network of international stockists and online, of course. 1 second, it's got to go on the screen to do that. And there. My background, I've been 40 years in commercial marine. I was a marine engineer, manager marine lubricants in Mobil Oil, sales director for A&P Ship Repair. They're the big ship repair group around the UK. I've seen what diesel boat can do to a big ship and basically 2 inches of steel. I was head of service sales in Wärtsilä, a big marine engine manufacturer. And now director of Marship, which is my own business, is commercial marine, and co-director of Marine16. Steve, do you want to say your bit there?
Yes, so good evening, everyone. So Steve Cox, so my early career was Unilever, specializing in field development of cleaning products. I'm a founder of a company called Biological Preparations, which is the market leader for ecological products and products based on bacteria, enzymes, and plant extracts for treatment specifically of grease buildup in drains. And so the fatbergs that you see, we use our friendly bacteria to get rid of them. I'm based up in beautiful mid Wales, where I run the blend plant and part of the office here, and a proud co-director of Marine16 with Peter. You won't hear so much from me tonight because we will be very much focusing on the diesel side, but you will get a few minutes of my time after this, just to sort of for me to talk about some cleaning products. So Peter, back to you.
Okay, thanks. And as Steve said, he's over in Newtown in Wales, and I'm over here in Gloucestershire in Tetbury. So as I say, it's going to be about 35 minutes from me. I'll be looking at diesel, what's changed, why all the problems, and what can be done about it, basically, which is what you're particularly keen on. And of course, Steve, well, for about 5 minutes, he'll tell you about biodegradable products, what they are, how do they work, and are they any good? He's forgotten more about biodegradables than none of us will ever know. Questions towards the end, it would be great, and look forward to them. So go back to diesel, modern diesel. If you imagine 1 barrel of modern diesel, 1 barrel of crude oil would come from the oil fields in the North Sea and the likes. It was what's known as Brent sweet crude. It has sulfur content of about 0.3%. It would go through fractional distillation unit to give you generally 40% finished product, the gas oil. Its sulfur was 0.3%, and that would go off to you, the end user, to shipping yachts or tractors or whatever. Flash forward to today, that 1 barrel of crude oil, it now comes from global oil fields, Middle East, North America, Venezuela, you name it. It's from places that were deemed poor quality and uneconomical in the 80s. They have to drill down and horizontal to get to the crude oil now. That crude is now sour crude. Its sulfur content is up to 3%. It has to go through many, many more processes, and now they get 90% finished product out of that barrel of crude. So they squeeze an extra 50% more out of a barrel of oil than they did in the 80s. It goes through So many processes, as I say, fractional distillation, hydrocracking, unification, you name it. That's just a few of what this diesel goes through. All to get our what is now ultra low sulfur diesel, 10 ppm, 0.001%. In the past, as I say, sulfur content wasn't a problem and it was low anyway. Now they're getting even lower at 10 ppm. That diesel now is highly stressed. It's been refined to within an inch of its life. It's highly unstable, it lacks a lubricant, and it leaves deposits. I've got their ID, which means internal diesel injector deposits. If you Google that, there's a lot on the web about them. From there, it goes to the blend plant, where a lubricant is added because it lacks a lubricant because they've taken out the sulfur, and by doing so, they've taken out the lubricant qualities. It's where the FAME is added, the fatty acid methyl ester, a stability improver, detergent, etc. It then goes on to become your finished product, marine gas oil, A2 red diesel as it was, or EN590, which is the diesel that you buy on the forecourt. Now we look at the journey, the journey of the finished product. Now the crude oil, the sour crude, it goes through transport, it goes through a tank farm, and it goes through a refinery in the UK or Europe. We can't do anything about that. So what comes out of there, we've got. But it then goes as a finished product in the EU or the UK into a blend plant, as I say earlier. That's where the additives are put in, the biodiesel, etc. Lubricant is added there as well. And from there, it becomes your marine gas oil. It will go directly to ships. It will also then become EN590 or A2 red through various transport, and it will go to a tank farm. From that tank farm, it will go through more transport to a regional distributor, through more transport to a local distributor, through more transport to your fishing boat, your petrol stations, or your marina tank, for example. That journey there is bought, it changes tanks and is bought and sold, can be up to 10 times. So it's 10 times the risk of water and contamination. So that gives you an idea just what this journey is. So I often talk to people and they say, well, we only get from a good supplier. Well, yes, of course you would, and so would we all, and I'm sure as heck I would. But how good is your supplier's supplier? And that's why I put that chain there, and it makes people realize it's quite a network. That journey can take up to 2 months to make that journey. Now, all the oil majors agree that modern diesel should not really be stored for longer than 6 months. Totally impractical on a boat, of course. So what we have to do is manage it, and how we're going to do it. Worth mentioning, I wrote this presentation not long after the pandemic, and at the time there was refinery cutbacks. During the pandemic, they cut back. You cannot close an oil refinery. You can slow it down, but you cannot close it. So they were still chucking out finished product at 65% of capacity. It had to go somewhere, and it went onto ships and storage facilities all around the world. That over the years has been cascading down, and to a certain extent, one of the reasons we have the problems now is because that's going into the supply chain. Largely finished now, of course, but it's still about. So in this slide here, I look at the need for clean, dry diesel and what's changed, both in terms of the diesel and the the technology of the engines. Now, as I said earlier, diesel quality is going down. It used to be North Sea oil, a nice Brent sweet crude. It's now from global oil fields, and it's a sour crude. Meanwhile, engine technology is increasing. You used to have what's called a Euro 1 engine or Tier 1 engine in the 1990s. Euro 7 is coming in 2025. The first car common rail was in the 90s, towards the late 90s. Common rail, very important. It's desperate for clean, dry fuel. Then you had the marine common rail engine came in around about the 2000s. Around about 2005 was the introduction of ultra-low sulfur diesel. Now, ultra-low sulfur diesel has brought its own problems. As I say earlier in the presentation, it's highly stressed and it leaves deposits. Then, to make matters worse, they brought in the Renewable Fuels Directive, which is an increasing amount of biodiesel, or what's known as FAME, which is a fatty acid methyl ester made from rapeseed oil, soy oil, McDonald's cooking fat, and the rest. Now you look at the quality of the engines, if you like. In the 1990s, your average fuel pressure would be around about 3,000 psi. That is about 1.3 tons per square inch, generally the weight of a family car. The injectors would open and close 17 times per second when the engine was doing 2,000 revs per minute, which is actually quite a lot. It's a mechanical device, and it has to open a valve, squirt the diesel in, close the valve, fill it up, and do all that 17 times a second. However, modern day engines are up to 50,000 pounds per square inch. That is the weight of 2 double-decker buses, or 22 tons per square inch, which is trying with that's the pressure inside the common rail fuel system. And they're now opening at 120 times a second. So where you think 17 is a lot, it's now 120 times a second. They do this because as the piston is coming up, it's firing all the way up and then back down again to extend the burn throughout the whole cycle. That way you can reduce NOx and SOx and things like that. But that is a phenomenal operating environment for an injector. Even to the point the majority, well, almost all injectors now are piezoelectric, because basically the solenoid valves, the electricity is too slow. They cannot operate at this 120 times a second. So any modern diesel, common rails on your vessels, on your boats, is going to be generally piezoelectric. This is a simple injector. Imagine that there's the opening and closing. Imagine that doing that. That's a solenoid one, so that's an earlier one. Imagine that doing that 120 times a second. For me, I'm an engineer, and I think that's quite mind-boggling. So what are the problems? Oxidative, thermal degradation, acidic degradation, asphaltenes. You often say to people, oh, I've got all of this rubbish on the bottom of my tank. Well, more often than not, you'll find it's actually asphaltenes and not diesel. But incompatibility, i.e. mixing of fuels, very important on yachts, because you could be picking up from France one time and then picking up from Holland another time. This was a big thing when I was at sea on ships. We had to be very careful we didn't mix fuels from different suppliers or different countries. The bio content, the FAME, the fatty acid methyl ester, contaminants, dust, dirt, rust, of course. Water is probably responsible for 85% of diesel problems. If you get the water out, you'll remove a lot of your problems. Lately is refinery additives. I'll go into that then a little bit further down the slides. And of course, good old diesel bug. But if you don't have water, you don't have diesel bug. So there is an example of oxidative, and thermal degradation. Basically, it's a lot of rubbish yuck on the bottom of your fuel tank. This is sodium salts of carboxylic acid, also known as the Victorians called it soap. That comes about because the fatty acid methyl ester, it reacts with the elemental metals within the fuel at what's called the rag layer, and that's the bit between the water and the diesel above. And you get this mildly acidic layer there, and it reacts, and that causes this salts of carboxylic acid. I say I'm an engineer, not a chemist. So if there's any chemists out there, you might understand it better than me, but it's soap. You can actually get a hold of this, scrape it off. You could almost wash your hands. It's pretty smelly, but it feels like you're washing your hands in soap. Another one, asphaltenes. Asphaltenes are getting more and more of a problem. Bear in mind, when you're running your engine, a marine engine particularly, it uses the fuel to cool the injectors. So the fuel is coming from the tank, through the pump, into the injectors, and then 50% is going back to the tank. It has to go through all that heat and pressure. And diesel is not designed for this. If you imagine one molecule of fuel, for example, it might do that journey 20, 30 times. before it itself is actually squirted into the engine and burned. It's not designed for that. It doesn't have the additives necessary to be a cooling fluid or heating fluid, the same sort of thing. So what happens is the asphaltenes, they agglomerate, they get together and they stick together and they fall to the bottom of the tank. And that's where you see this black, I don't know if you can see my pointing there going, this black tarry stuff, which is basically it's asphalt. It's like you see you walk on, you drive on the roads. It's hard and it's shiny, as opposed to diesel bug, for example, which is soft and slimy. But either one, it'll still block your filters and cause you problems. And then, of course, good old diesel bug. There's a few slides there or a few pictures. That on the coming out of that valve, that was from a fishing boat in the North Sea. It had it broke down. The RNLI had to go out and pull them in. That diesel bug, it's like a worm coming out there, but it was all the way through the whole lot. They caused them some problems, clearly. Now, this is an example of fatty acid methyl ester. This is what happens in your tank when it sits there for a long time. Let's just show you. You can see all of that. That's the flame, which is sitting there. And when you go to sea and you hit the breakwater, all of that is stirred up, and that will end up in your filters and block them. And normally at the breakwater and well, not something you want to do. Degradation from water about 6 months old. This one here shows, you see that there's a rag layer there, and those little bits inside that water. What's happened there is it's caused the water, and the interface between the water and the diesel is called is caused, as I said earlier, a mildly acidic layer, which is causing deposits to become apparent in the water itself. And that is only 6 months old. All of those little deposits will eventually gather on the bottom, and that all builds up the sludge over time. This is the good old diesel bug, of course, as we all know and not love. That's water, that's the fuel above it. It will sit there and it will eat the fuel and it will live off the oxygen in the water. That's how diesel bug does its thing. This is resins and degradation from diesel. This was about 2 years old. Yep, you can see it there. They are very hard resins that have gathered around the side. They will cause a lot of problems for an engine if they get in there. That's why it's good sometimes to have down to 2, but generally, although in fairness, 10 micron is okay on a filter to an engine. This is something, sticky diesel. It's not a very scientific name, but it's beginning to get quite common. And it's causing seized fuel pumps and injectors. You end up, the diesel actually smells like a solvent. It's got a turpentine type smell. So we were hearing more and more of this, and I've actually had it in my workshop where I do experiments and things. And I even know it was causing me problems. So anyway, we got some samples from customers around the place, and we sent them off for lab analysis using infrared spectroscopy. We have a very good relationship with the likes of Innospec, for example, who are one of our suppliers, corporate additive suppliers. They are the main, probably the leading additive supplier for the marine world, and we get on very well with them. So we tested it, and we found a new contaminant, basically. It's something called MEA triazine, and it's an H2S or hydrogen sulfide scavenger, and it's used in the refinery to remove excess hydrogen sulfide. If you go back what I said earlier, all of these hydrogen processes and all of these processes that are going into making your modern diesel and strip out all of that sulfur, sometimes it comes out of that refinery off spec. So to get rid of that remaining hydrogen sulfide, they'll use something called MEA triazine. This is a small, this is the results basically. This is on the top was our unknown sample. And there on the bottom you can see, and they said, well, based on that, there's a 99% surety that is MEA triazine. This was drained out the bottom of a diesel dipper from a customer. You can see the stuff in the bottom there. It's quite an eye-opener, really. You can imagine how that is going to cause problems within your fuel filters. Yeah, so, and it's also heavier than the diesel, so that's why the diesel dipper can handle it very easily, and it will lie in the bottom of your tanks. And as you hit the breakwater, that will come up and block your filter. Luckily, at the moment, it is not so common, and it really depends on the spec of the fuel as it left the refinery. But talking with the labs and talking with the guys and the boys up there, we are seeing now, we are believing now, because triazine on its own is not a major problem. But we are reckoning now that this triazine is reacting with the FAME, the fatty acid methyl ester, and in there of something called sterile glucosides, which is the not such a good part of FAME. This is FAME here, and this is a fuel filter, which was these things look like hairy caterpillars coming out of it, but that's FAME, sterile glucosides and the likes. Now, it doesn't take much imagination to recognize that that could easily turn into what we say here, sticky diesel. This stuff here, and this is like, it's like toffee. You can get it on your hands. You find it's very difficult to get rid of, even with a hand cleaner. And you can see on that little filter screen there how it's completely blocking it up. I've heard now a number of stories where customers, boat owners, are having to replace fuel pumps and injectors and the likes, all because of this. It's difficult to get out. So it's an expensive thing to get. Again, it's all about draining the bottom of your tank and keeping the bottom of your tank clean. So what can be done about it? Well, don't buy large volumes of fuel. That's the first thing. As I say earlier, that's not so easy on a boat. Remove the water. I cannot stress enough, you must remove the water from the fuel tank. However you do it, get it out. And treat with additives. Never has there been a more necessity for additives than there are now for all of the things I'm saying there. So don't buy large volumes of fuel. As I say, diesel has changed. All the oil majors are unanimous. Fuel should be used within 6 months. If you Google life of diesel, modern diesel, you'll see all this all over the internet. All of the oil majors are saying the same. And of course, it's totally impractical on a boat. So you need to maintain your fuel like you maintain your engine. We all try and maintain the engines as best we possibly can. You've really got to look after that fuel now. And one of the best ways to do it is to not have so much of it. So don't get more than you need within 6 months, if you can. As I say, remove the water. Water is the greatest contaminant in diesel. It's also the easiest to remove. Well, the free water is certainly. It comes in from absorption and condensation from the space above, and of course condensation from the sides of the tank. The supplier, as I say earlier, the tanks and ownership of fuel can change hands up to 9 times before you, the end user, the end user, gets it. Over-enthusiastic deck washing, well, sure, we've all done that. Mistaking the freshwater tank for the fuel tank. I've been on a couple of flotilla holidays where I've seen that happen. Now, if you have a drain, use it regularly, and I'm talking really once a couple of weeks, something like that. The buildup of water is a cumulative effect. It doesn't happen quickly, but it slowly builds up inside. If you don't have a drain, and when we invented the dipper, I realized then a lot of yachts don't have drains. On big ships, you have a drain, but we had to figure out a way, and we got something called a dip tube for that. But if you don't have a drain, if anything else, siphon it out, stick a hose down to the bottom, siphon it out, suck it, and get rid of it that way. Or, as I say there, get a diesel dipper, it'll do it for you. I don't know if you ever heard of a chap called Peter Kaplan, yachting journalist. He fitted a dipper and tested it on his boat. There's another recent editorial in the Practical Boat Owner. Considering that dipper is probably the biggest step forward in fuel cleanliness and therefore engine reliability since the introduction of the fuel filter, it is a very simple concept. I thought that was a great line, that, because it is a very simple concept, and it's independent of the engine. It's a bypass system, so-called kidney loop system. This is how it works. Basically, the fuel to the engine comes off the bottom, normally about 20 millimeters above, and returns from the engine. But here, this is where the sludge happens at the bottom. But unfortunately, a lot of tank manufacturers don't give you a way to drain it out so we can get it out. This is basically the purpose of the dipper. It sucks off the bottom, gets rid of the rubbish, and puts it back in again. Having invented the dipper and all the tests and everything, I thought, well, the one thing we do need really is also to try and stop the water getting in there. It's all very well and good getting it out once it's in, but try and stop it getting in. So we've produced now this inline silica tank dryer. Farmers use them regularly. They screw a great big, just a dryer onto the top of their tank, and that helps to stop the condensation coming in from the atmosphere. Totally impractical on a boat, of course. You can't have a dryer sticking out of your deck. So we came up with this. We get these 3D printed to our own design, and they would fit typically, never in the engine room, I have to say, but also generally the highest point of the boat. You want to get it away from the tank because you don't want to contaminate the the silica gel with diesel in any way. So generally, I would say in the cupboard or something in the galley area before it exits onto the deck. We make them so that you can take them apart and replace the silica gel inside. You can also dry it out in the oven. Orange is for Europe, and then there's a blue one for either UK, for the UK, or of course you can use the orange one in the UK. But the reason why we have the two is because apparently blue is toxic and it's not allowed in Europe. Don't know why, but that's the rules. So orange Europe and blue UK. So treat it with additives. As I said earlier on, there's never been a greater need for additives. And we've heard them all before. I used to hear them a lot of times when I was at sea in the 90s, 80s, 90s. Very skeptical. It's a waste of money. Snake oil, people glaze over. Dodgy salesmen promising wild fuel savings. Yes, and that's the problem. That's why they've got such a bad reputation. But ultra low sulfur diesel lacks a lubricant. It leaves deposits, internal diesel injected deposits, and it's unstable. So in ours, what you need, whatever additive you get, it should have a lubricity improver. It leaves deposits. So in there, we put in a detergent and a dispersant. The dispersant helps to keep the asphaltenes dispersed. So it does help, but it can't stop them agglomerating completely. It's also unstable. So we have an antioxidant. Indeed, we have now a greater amount of antioxidant because we did a lot of work again within a spec. And FAME is particularly bad. And we now have an increased amount of antioxidant or stability improver, if you like, in our diesel fuel complete. We also have a biocide and a demulsifier, more on the demulsifier later. Certainly in commercial marine, and I don't see any different in leisure marine, if you have a claim on a fuel component for an engine, the first thing the OEM will do is look at the fuel. Generally, they will blame the fuel and then run for the hills. And it's up to you a lot of the time to then prove it wasn't your fuel. And another thing, I've seen this with superintendents, injectors and pumps, they fail for a reason. People say, oh, the injectors fail again or something. It's always a common denominator. And 90% of the time, it's the fuel, lack of lubricity, hazy diesel, all the rest of it. Now, lacks a lubricant, I've just put this on here. This is what's called a high-frequency reciprocating rig. It's something they use in the lab. This is a ball and a known weight or load on top, and it cycles back and forwards. As it does that in diesel, which has a lubricant. And in there, it leaves an indent in the plate, and that's known as a scar. And after a certain period of time, they measure the scar here. Now, in the States, they allow that diesel will have enough lubricant if it's not greater than 520 microns, which is basically about 0.5 millimeter. Now, I don't know why they do that, why the States have that higher specification. Because in Europe, and the EN590, which you put in your cars and everything, is 460 microns. So that's the space for that scar there is 460 microns across. Now, in Wärtsilä, I'm an ex-engine manufacturer, the people I work for, they would prefer 400 microns. But the reason I put this is actually because your original gas oil, before they started fiddling with it, before they started putting it through all the fanciest refinery techniques and what have you, it used to be 350 microns. So it used to have a lot more lubricant. And somebody said to me recently, I don't know if you remember years ago when I was a boy, I was a petrol pump attendant. And diesel, if you spilled diesel on the forecourt, it would be greasy, it would be horrible. You had to try and pick it up somehow. You just don't get that with modern diesel, and that's the reason why. Leaves deposit, internal diesel injected deposits. Say it lacks stability. It gives you lacquering and gumming. That's the internal diesel injected deposits. More so with FAME, fatty acid with ester. You'll know it when you start smoking, misfiring, difficult starting, sludge, increased fuel consumption, which we tend not to recognize on the boat often, and premature, as I say, premature pump and injector failure. Now, the FAME content, which was introduced and going to be more so, that reduces the life of the fuel even more. And so we put an antioxidant in there. Now, to give you some give some idea, a banana is a plant. It oxidizes and it rots. We all know that. We've seen them rotting in a bowl. Well, biodiesel is from a plant. It oxidizes and it rots. Only you'll find it in your fuel filters because it's sitting on the bottom of your tank and you don't see it. That just gives you an analogy of what's going on in your modern diesel. Now, I put this one in here because we have there's some additives out there. We'll use a glycol or alcohol carrier, and it will try to absorb the water into the fuel. So I say there, don't use an additive that absorbs water into diesel. The reason for this, years ago in the 90s, it used to work. It was fine. It was good. With technology, we had engines that would burn anything. You could burn coal dust, those things. But a modern engine needs super clean, super dry fuel. So if you now put in an additive, a water-absorbing fuel additive, its job is to absorb the free water off the bottom of the tank. Meanwhile, it's because of the hygroscopic effect of the fatty acid methyl ester, the biodiesel, it's absorbing the water above the tank. So your diesel is becoming basically under attack from both sides. Now, the more hazy and water saturated the diesel becomes, the less able it is to lubricate the components. So our view is basically enhance the dropping of water out of the diesel, so then you can get rid of it by drain, by dipper, by siphon, by something, but drop it out and get rid of it. Now, this is a small tank. I've used this on exhibitions. Those things there represent baffles in a tank. This is the fuel suction, and you can see up here is the fuel return to the engine. Now, we don't know what happens in our fuel tanks, but it's quite an eye-opener. This is standard clear diesel, Tesco's finest, I think it was, EN590. But as I started going, you can see this is the fuel return from the engine. This is the suction to the engine. Now, as you hit the breakwater, you're down by the stern here, you hit the breakwater, that free water gets sucked into the engine. 50% is coming back, and this is what happens when it comes back. There. Saturated water, which is returned from the engine, is very hygroscopic. It is readily mixed with the water in there. You put hazy saturated diesel, and that causes injector failures. It causes the problems of the soap, for example. It causes no end of problems just because of the water in there. This one, by the way, you can go on the website. Same with the sticky diesel earlier. I've written some blogs, a slightly longer version of this video if you want to see it and see those blogs on the website. So to summarize, I think we're doing okay in time. Don't buy large volumes of fuel. no more than you can use within 6 months. Remove the water. However you do it, get it out. That's all I can say. I cannot stress that enough. And treat with a multifunctional additive. Ours, for example, is Diesel Fuel Complete. Now, we have in Marine16 lined up 2 additives. There's a diesel bug treatment. We hear a lot of people say, oh, we use your Marine16, and we find out then after a while it's actually DBT they're using. It kills diesel bug. It does it very effectively. However, it doesn't do anything else to the fuel. And if you don't have water and you don't have diesel bug, you haven't actually achieved anything. You've got nothing to kill. So we would always recommend you use Diesel Fuel Complete. That has the essential ingredients, the additives, the blend that you require, lubricant to detergent, additional stability improver now since our discussions within the spec, a cetane improver, a demulsifier, and we also put a small amount of biocide in there because there's always some water around, as you say, hazy diesel and the likes, and that'll help to keep bug at bay before it can become a problem. And I think over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm sure the participants will have questions on fuel, and so I'm going to keep my side of it really brief. But it's just part of my sort of experience in biological products was how we could then extend that to the Marine16 range. Slide, Peter, please.
Oh.
I feel very much like lockdown. Slide, Peter. Right. So, so basically, the one thing that you will hear: ecological products don't work, and they don't work because they try to be really eco and have gone sort of too far down that route, and therefore don't work properly. So the parts to a cleaning product: you have surfactants, solvents, fragrance, a water softening agent, and the dye. So all of these are chosen to be eco, and in the past they just haven't worked, just purely because the wrong choices of products have been made. Next piece, please.
Sorry. Yeah.
So how do we do it differently? So we're basically using the latest biodegradable surfactant base, using in effect coconut-based surfactants. No solvents whatsoever, keeping the phosphates to a minimum level. Now you can, and there are certain products that are advertising phosphate free, but our experience has shown that actually if you replacing phosphates, you have to replace them with a thing called zeolites, and zeolites are far less biodegradable than phosphates, and so it's best to have them in there in minimal amounts just to help the product performance. Fragrances that will work but are more environmentally acceptable, natural food colors rather than synthetic, and then our big separator, bacteria and enzymes. So nature's friendly cleaning assistant and the part of the cleaning product that keeps on working. Next, Peter, please. So the surfactants, they swell the soiling to make removal easier. And so if you have fabrics with soiling on them, then the surfactant actually is almost like a head and tail. And so it attaches to the soiling element and almost creates a ball that allows the soiling to be removed from the fabric or from the area. The phosphates, as I've described earlier, but then it comes down to the bacteria and selecting the correct bacterial strain to do the right job within the product. So there are literally hundreds of thousands of strains of bacteria, and if you select the wrong one, then it won't do the job. Slide, Peter, please. So how do bacteria clean? They're basically enzyme factories. And so enzymes break down the waste products into small parts and they act as food for the bacteria. The bacteria digest the smaller waste products, particles, and allow them to survive. And the bacteria reproduces, and so the process continues. So our great statement, the cleaning doesn't stop when you put away the cloth. So how do we know which bacteria to use? So we've got literally thousands of hours of research to understand which bacterial strain produces the right enzyme. And so, as an example, we have a great product for breaking down hydrocarbons. So you wouldn't use the bacteria that produces oil-loving enzymes if you didn't want to break down oil. So they just simply wouldn't work. And so that's where we have to make sure that we select the correct amount. Next picture, please. So our master strains come from all sorts of different locations. And so a couple of examples, our strain BS1307 was established and found in hay, and it's an absolutely fantastic cleaner and degrader for foods, fats and grease, and is used in our above deck cabin and heads cleaner. But then strain HP3 is used within our deck and sail or within our engine and bilge cleaner because it loves hydrocarbons. So we ferment those, we freeze dry them, and they then go into our products. And in our main products, there'll be upwards of 15 million bacteria per mil of product. So you can imagine there are billions of products in our cleaning product to do a brilliant, friendly cleaning job. So the next part of it is, what about the plastic? And we're proud to say it is zero plastic. So our main product is provided in an aluminium bottle. And inside the aluminium bottle is a water-soluble sachet. If the aluminium bottle breaks, you run over it, step on it, do whatever, we will replace it. Once the product is empty, you then buy from us a concentrated sachet, you drop it into the bottle, top it up with water. It really is as simple as that. It's a genuine zero plastic bottle, zero plastic refill, and so a genuine circular economy product. Okay. So in summary, for me, the correct surfactants, the correct water softening agents, the correct bacterial strains, producing eco products that do work, and zero plastic pollution. So that's my quick 5 minutes, because I'm sure you will have loads and loads of fuel related questions. And so because I can see there's loads coming up on the screen, Pete. So I don't know if you can see them. They are coming up, I can tell you. Right, that's me done, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Oh, I see. Now, yeah.
Now you can see the questions.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, let's start from the top, shall we? Okay. We've all got the bug for diesel bug. Not sure to answer that one. I've used GTL fuel for several years. It's a very clean fuel, bio-free, burns cleanly. Nevertheless, I've continued to use Marine16 products. Have you any observations on GTL? GTL is a good fuel. It is more expensive. What products do you use? I don't know if you can hear me, Robert. Robert is there? Can you hear me? No. Okay. I don't know what product you use.
I'm here.
Sorry?
I am here. I use the not the diesel bug killer, the other one, the
complete,
the routine one, yeah.
The routine one, the brown one. Yeah. GTL doesn't have all the same problems as your standard diesel, but you won't do any harm by using the DFC because it has got detergent in there. You probably wouldn't need the dispersant and the things like that, but it will help to keep it fresh. But as you're using GTL for very good reason, and I would keep using it, but you can't get it everywhere. But yeah, the DFC will probably help you.
It's commonly available, well, not commonly, but widely available in the Netherlands. And on the Orwell Foxes, they only sell GTL. They haven't told anybody, but I know it's GTL.
Yeah, it's getting more and more common. Yes, without a doubt, the Dutch have had it for a long time. And indeed, actually, the Dutch are way ahead of the game with replacing diesel with gas. You know, so yeah, they know what they're doing. Is that all right, Robert?
Yes, answered.
Yep. So what is and this is from Tony, what is the fuel rate of the dipper? Is it, if it is mounted at about the same level as the fuel tank is fed by? Yeah, the fuel rate is about 1.5 to 2 liters a minute. It's very low flow. It's not the job of the dipper is to clean the bottom of the fuel tank, or is to keep the bottom of the fuel tank clean and debris free, so it can't block your filters. We are not trying to that one modern word, polish the whole fuel tank. So and you have to lift it up from the bottom. You saw the how readily diesel and water will combine as it's agitated through a pump. So if you move this stuff too quickly, it will become saturated, and then it's more difficult to deal with. So yeah, very, very slowly we lift it up, separate it out inside the dipper, and then send it back to the fuel tank.
Peter, I've got one message, from somebody who's had to leave. So he just sent me a private one. And the question was, what good does fuel polishing do? Can you suggest an installer for the fuel dipper? Okay.
The fuel polishing is what we used to call at sea was fuel purification. There's two ways of looking at that. If you look at fuel polishing, will get rid of debris or contaminants, and then you've got fuel polishing that will get rid of the saturated fuel and contaminants. If you just have contaminants, then your engine is already acting as a fuel polisher or purification anyway, because 50% is going back to the tank. So if you put in a very low micron filter through the rake cores, never get rid of those, they're good products. Put a low micron filter in the rake core, you've already got a fuel polishing system set up. I'm not so keen on their what's called aqua block, and that's why in the dipper we actually have another purification type filter. It's not an aqua block. I tried them. Sorry, what was the other question? Sorry, Judy, what was the other? No, we can't hear you. No, you've gone. Sorry, Judy, can't hear.
Hang on. Can you suggest an installer for the fuel?
Installer, that was it, yeah. We don't install ourselves. We only sell the product. They are very, very easy to install. It's literally bolted to a bulkhead, sucked from the bottom of the tank. If you don't have a drain, we can supply a dip tube flange, come from the top of the tank and tee in back to where the fuel goes back in. Any competent boat mechanic would be able to fit it, and even also a competent DIY person. So hopefully that answers that. In terms of just going back, Tony, you asked about the fuel flow of the dipper. Is it mounted at the same level as the fuel tank? It's fully pumped, so it can be below or above. Is it fed by a 10mm outside diameter copper pipe? We wouldn't recommend copper, only because modern diesel doesn't like copper, but the reality is copper is everywhere. You could use copper pipe, but we tend to use aluminium, or in a stainless steel tank we'll use stainless steel. We recommend stainless steel stainless steel pipe. Hopefully that helps, answers that. From Julian, we got, what steps should we take when we launch our boat which has sat with full tanks of diesel for the last 8 months? We had a diesel bug additive before leaving the boat. What if it's fully, the problem is when you fill your tank up, and it's now 8 months old, it's not going to be the end of the world. 8 months is okay. You could get away with a year. It depends. Check out that you haven't got any water in there. That's your main problem. But generally speaking, next year now, for example, I wouldn't, or the end of this year, when you lay the boat up, I wouldn't top the fuel tanks up. Keep them as low as possible. Empty them if you can. That's the best thing. You won't have a diesel problem storing it if you don't have any diesel in there. So you added a diesel bug additive. Yes, if there has been any condensation, that will kill it as it forms. But at the end of the day, try and get the water out if there is any in there. What is the difference between marine diesel and biodiesel? Marine diesel, MGO, was called marine gas oil initially. When biodiesel came in, it didn't have marine gas oil was absent of any fame, biodiesel. But now it is the same. It's slowly caught up. There was problems with biodiesel, and so they didn't want to put it into ships. But it's all the same stuff now. Big ships, which I get involved with, you can still get marine gas oil, but that's also called DMA, DMB, and different types. And you won't have bio in there, but you will have it now in marine gas oil. So that's that. And is there a difference between red and white? There used to be, but as I remember now, as I recall, all red is now white with a dye. There used to be a difference between the red. It didn't have all of the additives and things like that in. It didn't have the bio initially, then it did. And I can't even remember the ISO number for it now. But more now generally, any red diesel you buy will be EN590, which is the same stuff that we buy from the forecourt, but it's got a red dye in it, and therefore it doesn't have a tax. Although I think I don't have a boat, but I think you pay tax on a diesel now anyway, as I recall. I could ready to be corrected on that. I've only used marine diesel. I thought it was a lubricant. This is from Ian. I've only used marine diesel. I thought it was a lubricant. Is biodiesel different? Sorry, okay. Marine diesel, it goes back to what I was saying earlier there. It all tends to be EN590 now. What I have found with EN590 through the labs is not all EN590 is supposed to be 7% FAME and getting more. I have seen some EN590 fuels with almost only 2% FAME. Now, FAME does bring lubricant qualities to the party, if you like. It's a bit of a solvent, but it can help the lubricant qualities of the diesel. So this is, it leaves the factory if they are saying, well, we're adding 7%, for example, FAME to bring up the lubricant, well, because they have to, because of Renewable Fuels Index directive. Therefore, the lubricity should be better, and then you suddenly find out it hasn't. Then they got the problem there. So I thought it was a lubricant. Yeah, so biodiesel does have better lubricant qualities, but it's not always there. In which case, you have a bigger issue than you did before. If that makes sense, what I've just said there, hopefully. This is from John Nixon. If I store only enough fuel for 6 months, my tank will be half empty. I understand this will result in condensation of water in the tanks. I've always kept my tanks full to avoid condensation. What's the solution to that problem? Very good one. And this is where we have changed our mantra. In the past, yes, of course, top your tanks up, less airspace above it, less condensation, and less chance of it absorbing the water. But the reality is now the biodiesel is hygroscopic and it's absorbing that water out of the atmosphere. So what we say now is better to get them down as low as possible. Put a desiccant breather on it. Either if you're laying it up, you can screw the type on the outside of the boat, or what we have inside the boat, and then deal with the water in the springtime. So get down there, open the drain cock, get any water that's accumulated in there. My view is you're better off dealing with the water that's accumulated over the 6 months, rather than leave fuel in there to have degraded diesel when you come back. So get as low as possible, deal with the water, fill it up with nice fresh diesel in the springtime, and you're set to go then. And I would recommend obviously put DFC in at that point as well, which will help to keep it fresh for the next 6 months, if you like. This is from Nigel Kingsley. Our marina neighbour said that the recent fuels, marina neighbour said that the recent fuels with biodiesel degrade in a period of months. O-ring seals, he had to replace the seals in his injector. Initially, years ago, well, yeah, it's been some years now. But the biodiesel, the solvents, the fatty acid methyl ester acted as a solvent, and yes, it did degrade the elastomers, the elastomers, it's called, yeah, the seals. However, modern engines now, generally they'll have Viton seals and not a problem. So yeah, I would suggest they just upgrade the seals basically, because biodiesel has been around for, let's say earlier 2005, it's been around, so a long time, or 2009. Our marine, I said that one. Yeah. Oh yeah, any comments on this? Got that. Will the diesel dipper prevent asphaltene's buildup? This is from Robert. Yes, definitely. Asphaltenes is heavier than diesel. It will agglomerate. It will fall to the bottom. The whole concept of the diesel dipper was, when I invented it, was instead of like have the hose go to the sludge, if you like, let the sludge come to the pickup of the dipper, and it'll happen while you're at sea, while the contents of the bottom of the tank is all sloshing about. Asphaltenes being heavier than the diesel, it will just suck it up, deposit it into the collecting chamber at the back of the dipper, and you drain it out on a regular basis. What grade of stainless steel do you recommend for the fuel pipe? It depends on the tank. If it's a stainless tank, 316 or 304, we would recommend a stainless steel pickup tube. After that, plastic tanks, aluminium tanks, just use an aluminium pickup tube. Even B&Q, we can supply them, but it's expensive because they are long. You don't know how big a tank is. And B&Q sell them in meter lengths, so sometimes easier and cheaper just to get them locally. Can you see water in the bottom of a tank? No, you can't. I had in my cottage, I had what do you call it, an oil tank, and I tested what we call a diesel duct on there, and I got 25 litres out of a 1,000 litre oil tank. It looked fine from the top. You couldn't see, what you're seeing is the top of the water, not the top of the tank, at the bottom of the tank. So no, you can't see it. But generally speaking, all tanks have water of some description. You mentioned that we shouldn't mix diesel fuels. How do you know what we have and what we are wanting? You mentioned that we shouldn't mix diesel fuels. How do we know what we have and what we want to fill up with? EN590 is the specification for Europe. So you will always generally get EN590, but there can be some discrepancies. Maybe not quite so much now, but if you're picking some up in France and then much later you're picking some up in Holland, there could be just slight variations in the quality or the standard and specifications of the diesel. We had a situation where a cable ship, which we supplied additives to in my other business, commercial business, they picked up 100 tons of diesel in Dunkirk, and they got to the fjords in Norway, and the engines were already shutting down because they had accidentally mixed it with another diesel, and it caused no end of problems in terms of lacquering and gumming on the fuel components, etc. So basically, try not to if you can. Not easy, of course. You've only got 2 tanks, and sometimes you've only got 1, so there's nothing you can do about it. But try not to if you can. Does Marine16 complete have a shelf life?
I've done that one, Peter.
Yes, we
I've done the next one.
Sorry?
I've done that one, and I've done the next one.
Oh, you've been busy. Oh, okay, yeah. Well done.
And so then the Marine16, will the complete stop asphaltenes?
Yeah, it has. It will not stop asphaltenes. You can't stop it. It degrades. The fuel is degrading. It's going from the tank to the engine and then back again. So, but what the diesel fuel complete will do, it has a dispersancy in there, and that helps that to keep it in suspension a little bit longer. But you cannot stop it completely, no matter what any competitors say. We like to say, give the truth, and you can't stop it completely. Better is to use your diesel and don't keep it for too long, because it's a law of diminishing returns as it's degrading and the asphaltenes are gathering, and you have a lot of it. It's a never-ending story then, basically. Is it a problem? Is it a problem if I overdose my tank with a fuel additive, as it is a challenge to get? No, it's not a problem. Steve, I think you said the DFC, you could almost burn it on its own, couldn't you?
Absolutely, yeah. There's no issue with that at all. Yeah. So yeah, there's no issue with either of with any of those.
Oh, I see you've already answered it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I think, Steve, some people might not be looking at the chat, so you might.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously,
including me, Judy.
So the show that I just answered Wendy and Richard with regards to the shelf life. We recommend 2 years. We've started putting expiry dates on it. but as long as it's kept sealed, it should be fine. Then we said about overdosing, and so overdosing will not harm the engine, and this applies to the DBT, the DFC, or the injector cleaner. Peter, you've just answered about the asphaltenes, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So then the next one was Nigel about the pipe running to the tank bottom in HRs, whether it reaches far enough to test for water.
Does anyone know whether pipe running to the tank bottom in HRs? Can somebody tell me what that is?
Hallberg Rassy.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry?
Peter, in terms of getting rid of the water every spring, I mean, I asked the question about can you see it?
Oh, right. Okay.
So I'm assuming that what you have to do is drain a bit of the fluid of the fuel from the bottom of the tank every kind of spring and put it for a cleaning mechanism.
Well, get it out. That's right. It's heavier than diesel, so you'll see it immediately. Get down to the very bottom of the tank, suck it out. When you get diesel and keep getting diesel, then there's no more water. It's as simple as that. So, and then let that settle out and put the clean diesel back in the tank again.
I can help answer that question. It's Peter Bentley here, Hallberg Rassy 342 owner. The dip tank, I can only speak for a 342, but I can't imagine they will be any different. The dip tank, the dip pipe goes significantly deeper than the fuel draw off pipe. And we do ours every year. We have a big sort of horse syringe is what I would call it, which we attach via a flexible pipe to the dip tube. It always brings off a small quantity of water, but I have never had any water in the primary fuel filter. Therefore, QED, the dip tube must go lower than the fuel pickup tube because the dip tube is picking up water and the fuel pickup tube is not picking up water. And I imagine that that will be consistent across all the Hallberg Rassys. For those of you who don't know where to find it, it is a small additional pipe that comes out of the top of the tank with a small shut-off valve on it, if that's what you're looking for.
Is that Peter? Is that a sump on the bottom of the tank?
No. So the tank bottom on our boat is a flat bottom tank. There is no sump on the bottom of the tank that I'm aware of. But there is a dip tube which is built into the tank by Hallberg Rassy, and as is evidenced by the fact that the dip tube picks up water and the fuel pickup tube does not pick up water, we must assume that the dip tube goes nearer to the tank bottom than the fuel pickup tube. And
I would say that was yes.
My guess is that there is a small amount of what in an airplane world we would call unusable fuel in the bottom of the tank, which can't be taken out through the fuel pickup tube.
If I could just... I don't know if it's of any help, but I have spoken. Sorry, it's Julian Baxter from Quattro. I have spoken to the manufacturers, Hallberg Rassy, about the manufacturers of their tanks, and they have confirmed to me that all models of boat since about 2002, 2001, and probably earlier, the so-called dip tube that goes to the bottom, which is connected to a hand pump to test your fuel. That pipe terminates 10 millimeters above the bottom of the tank, and fuel is taken out from the tank at 25 millimeters from the bottom of the tank. I hope that probably answers the question.
That's very clear. Thank you.
It does indeed. Thank you very much. And the process you use is exactly what I do. I pull it out. In fact, I haven't seen any water in the bottom, and I just pump it out into a clear plastic container and have a look at it. And if it doesn't look too bad, just carry on. But if you can see lots of rubbish, I pull a litre or two off, and it then goes clear. So that system works well.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, and yeah, rather than siphon, use a horse syringe. I'm sure that works quite well for you.
Yeah, and also, yes, you can actually the pump supplied, the brass pump supplied with HR. I find the seals jam terribly, so you suddenly pumps out and shoots diesel all over the place. But you can get a very nice one in Marine Superstore, which you can take to pieces each time you use it and clean it out so it doesn't jam up next time.
But all I can say is when you're doing this, do it regularly. Just keep that water out of the tank because that will cause all of the problems. However you get it out, just get that water out.
Can I add something? I used to work for the electricity supply industry, and the way transformers have the same issue with breathing in moist air.
Yeah.
And yes, they had breathers, but every year or so you tested the oil by draining at the bottom. It was put in a test tube and just heated gently, and if it was just a crackle test. If it starts to crackle, you know you've got moisture in there. I haven't tried it with diesel fuel. You don't want to vaporize it and burn it that way, but you'd soon know just by heating it.
Yeah, I know that. I used to work at facilities engineering as well. So yes, Robert, I've seen that. And indeed, it's from that transformers is where we thought, well, why don't diesel tanks have these silica shell dryers on the top? But of course, you can't put one on a boat because you trip over the damn thing every day, you know. So
yeah, well, a friend's done it. He modified just a regular fuel filter. It got gratings in it, such they just took out the filter, put in silica gel, and they're away, because he had severe diesel bug. And
that would work. And rather than you something on the once you lay it up and no one's going to be actually sailing it, then you could put a silica gel dryer on the top of some description. And that would work. Yeah,
Peter, we're kind of running over time.
Okay.
But I think we've got a few more questions.
Let's just go through them, shall I?
The next one was about range of dosing levels.
Yes, so I have replied to that, but basically, so it's 100 mil on DFC. It's 100 mil to 100 litres. That's a standard across the board with every fill. On DBT, there are two levels. There is a shock dose, which is 100 mil to 100 litres, and preventative is 100 mil to 2,000 litres. However, we are sort of trying to get people to move away from DBT unless they have physically got diesel bug, and should be switching to DFC. And so it then just really, the DBT should only be used as a shock dose.
Yeah, and also that the 100 mil to 2,000 litres, it all depends. It hinges on the fact that you've got to get rid of the water. Otherwise,
yes, absolutely.
It's a bit like you're sending a scouting party to fight a battle.
Yeah,
which could happen there.
Yeah. So then Barry was asking about mixing additives, and so fuel set has a different active ingredient in it, in as much as it's enzymatic. Using DFC will deactivate the fuel set, but it won't cause any harm in the fuel whilst you change over to a different product. It's just that DFC will stop fuel set working.
You missed a couple of questions. There's one about a distributor in Europe.
Yeah, sorry, replied to that. So Julian, yeah, so we have a distributor in Belgium. So I don't know, I don't have Paul's details with me, but just drop an email to info at Marine16 and I can give you Paul's details for Belgium on that.
And then how effective are the standard water separation filters?
Yeah, I can answer that. I don't know how good the Volvo Pentas are, but I test when the dipper, the dipper will take out free water. But if you want a purifier or polishing system, we can also put on an absorbent filter on there to take out the hazy saturated water, which is what the Volvo Penta ones are doing. So I don't know how good the Volvo Pentas are, but I know the Raycors, I tested them and they weren't as good as the ones that we use. So we tend to go with the ones I've got now, which are for biodiesel and fuel polishing systems. Does DFC react with any additives that ESSO add to the fuel? I would suspect not. I used to. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I used to work for Mobil Oil, bought out by ESSO, although they don't like to say that. Well, Mobil and certainly used to use the likes of Lubrizol and Innospec, probably use the same additives that we do.
Yeah.
So I would say, as he says,
pretty similar.
That's what as Steve says there. So. Did you answer the fuel set, Steve? I think you did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
What was your answer about the ESSO fuel additives?
Yeah, the additives within DFC are similar to those used by the multinationals.
Okay.
So there's no reaction.
I was told by someone in Port Solent Marina, where they get their fuel from SO40, that that there were some additives that may cause a problem if they reacted together, but you think that's not true?
Well, that might be the likes of fuel set, because
Exactly.
that's a different technology.
Yeah.
As Steve has said there, it uses enzymes. Fuel set is absorbs the water on the free water into the body of the diesel. So its job is to do just that. And yet Marine16, our technology, our philosophy is to drop that water out. So they're reacting against each other, and that might be what that person was saying there.
I mean, I think if you take nothing else away from this tonight, it is water management in your fuel. It really is absolutely critical.
Okay, thank you.
Will this chap be saved online? I think
I've answered that one, Peter. Yes, so just for everybody, we are recording it. I'm hoping that Judy's got enough memory on her computer to record it all.
I hope so. Haven't checked it, but I hope so.
And what we're planning to do is, if possible, we will load this onto YouTube, so that it's available, and then there'll be a link on the HROA website.
And John, if you like, we as Marine16 can also put that on social media with a link to that if you wish.
Great.
If you're okay with that, because that will help you guys in the Cruising Association as well, I think.
And also just your slides as well would be very useful, Peter.
Sorry, just the slides.
And the slides as a whole as well. So
Oh, I see. Right, so we can get them off as a PDF or something.
Yes,
like
that would be great. Yeah.
I'll try and get that to you, Judy. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I think by the look of it, that's the last of the questions.
Thanks.
So I'd like to thank you, Peter and Steve, for a most interesting and sort of learning a lot from what you have said there, and informative. Yes, very informative session. Thank you very much indeed. And that was brilliant.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, because I think you probably heard what Steve said there, and we're very passionate about what we do. I disappear in the workshop and I come out again a lot later. I'd spill diesel all the time. And actually, Steve's zero products are absolutely wonderful at cleaning up diesel, which is just as well.
All right, before everybody signs off, can I remind you that there is one more session on Zoom, which is on the 12th of March, and it'll be about digital communications afloat and making the right choices for you. So I hope you'll be able to register and join in with that.
Can I just say well done and thank you very much. As a fairly new HR owner, this has been the most informative session I've ever been a part of. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those kind words. Yeah, and we can add something.
Please don't forget, we're at the end of an email for technical queries with regards to this. Happy to help.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Brilliant.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, for turning up. And it's been a great session, and hope to see you all at the next meeting, as John has said, on the 12th of March, and then we'll prepare a programme for next year. But please, your ideas, your suggestions, what do you want to hear, will be most welcome. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for everybody, and good evening.
Bye.
Thank you, Judy, and everyone. It was brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well done.
Bye. Thanks.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
So Judy, you're still there?
I'm still here. Yes. Yeah. I've got to work out how to save the chat.
Yeah.
But the questions have been answered anyway in the recording, so that will help. Let's see about chat. Save chat. There you go. Right. So hopefully that's saved.
Hi there.
And I'll stop the recording.